It's a brand new week. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Business Morning. 55 minutes of current and relevant business talk. And it does seem like electricity is in the air. So we'll pick it up from where Sunrise Daily stopped when he talked about electricity in Nigeria. Well, on business, we'll talk about more business. And of course, the issues around that, supply and subnationals. That's part of what you'll be getting on Business Morning today. But first, let's start from the global space as usual, where we tell you that global oil prices fell on Monday, and it's on concerns of the escalating trade war between the United States and China that could weaken global economic growth and dent fuel demand. Brent, we see, lost 29 cents. That's about 0.5% to $64.47 a barrel. WTI, of course, is also down this morning, 0.44% to $60.09 a barrel. Goldman Sachs expects Brent to average $63 and WTI to average $59 for the rest of this year. They have a higher forecast for gold, where it seems like investors are taking a hedge, and it sees global oil demand in the fourth quarter of this year, 2025, rising by just 300,000 barrels every day, year on year, given the weak growth outlook. That's what Goldman Sachs is saying. Beijing increased its tariff on the United States import to 125. On the reverse side, it's 145. And Trump, remember, on Saturday, granted exclusions from steep tariffs on smartphones, computers, and some other electronics largely imported from China. So even though we still have this 125 tariff on imports from China, when it comes to seems the core of the trade between U.S. and China, there's now an exemption. So is President Trump blinking? I wonder. Well, that's it from there. We'll have more of that, of course, when we go to the global space to see what's happening. Now coming to Nigeria, the Central Bank of Nigeria has reported high loan default rates among large private, non-financial corporations and other financial corporations, raising fresh concerns about credit risk at the upper end of the lending market. This, according to the Apex Bank Credit Condition Survey report for the first quarter of 2025. Despite overall improvement in loan performance across most segments, the report shows that large firms and OFCS experienced a deterioration in loan repayments, with both segments posting negative default index of -0.6. And this marks a return to adverse credit performance for categories that had shown modest gains in previous quarters. And now to the real sector. Traders at the Trade Fair International Market, or JOR, in Lagos are still counting their losses after the recent demolition of some structures at the multi-billion naira infrastructure. Well, the demolition has been attributed to some individuals described as leadership of the market. That's how they've been described, and some of those affected are appealing for intervention by relevant authorities, including the State Commissioner of Police, in order to avoid public unrest. As they say, they have proof of legitimate occupation of parts of the market, which is been described as extension.
Documents that we are given by BBA for the plaza we are occupying. We show them this document. They are not willing to look at it, but rather they went at night to remove part of our plaza. They even removed the sockaway where it was originally dug. They removed it and put it almost at the road, constituting health nuisance to members of the community of this market. So what we are doing will cause a health hazard, and it can also result to breakdown of law and order. We didn't want to contend with them because they came with a lot of talks, and that's why we have reported to the police, and we are also notifying the press that this can bring more trouble if it's not brought under control.
The Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority has slashed the price of natural gas for power generation companies. This is coming amid about 2 trillion naira debt owed to gas companies by the power generation companies as a result of what they call illiquidity. Gencos are now expected to pay $2.13 per million British terminal units, according to a document that was released by the NMDPRA. It should be recalled that in March, the regulator introduced a revised pricing structure for natural gas in strategic sectors, resulting in an 11% increase in power sector prices. The domestic base price for the power sector increased from $2.18 to $2.42, while commercial sector pricing was adjusted to $2.92. However, in the document titled Announcement on Establishment of the Year 2025 Domestic Base Price and Applicable Wholesale Price of Natural Gas for Strategic Sectors, the NMDPRA said natural gas will now be sold at the rate of $2.13. The new pricing framework takes effect from April 1, and the NMDPRA shared this. Connected to that, the federal government has announced a significant improvement in the stability of Nigeria's power grid, attributing it to installation of additional 700 megawatts in transmission capacity. The Minister of Power, Mr. Adelabu, said this at the weekend when he received the EU ambassador to Nigeria in his office in Abuja. He explains that previously, once the grid supply approached 5,000 megawatts, the system became unstable and prone to collapse. He adds that nearly 90% of the new capacity has already been installed and is operational, leading to noticeable improvement in grid performance. Well, I believe a lot of Nigerians will have a lot of things to say to that. Has its supply improved in your area? That, of course, can make a whole form a whole conversation for a segment of this program or any other program like that. But let's find out what's going on in Imo State. Now, it is worthy of note that in August 2024, the governor of Imo State, Mr. Hope Uzodimma, signed a memorandum of understanding with Orashi Electricity Company Limited to achieve the purpose of supplying power to the 27 local government areas. So this, of course, was built on that new law that was in 2023, the Electricity Act 2023, liberalizing the electricity sector to allow for participation of state and private sectors and in the area of renewable, and encourage private sector participation and encourage a more competitive and efficient electricity market. We've seen Imo State, they've localized that bill. They did it in May last year. Let's find out what improvements they have recorded after this, almost a year after it's been localized. And we are speaking with the Commissioner for Power and Electricity in the state, Engineer Wabueze Oguchieneti. He joins us now from Owerri, the capital. Good morning, Engineer, and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you, sir. So tell us how can you assess? It's almost a year since you domesticated the electricity law in Nigeria. You also signed that agreement with Orashi Electricity Company. What fruits do you have to show for these moves that you have made since the new law in Nigeria?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, you are right. Of course, with the constitutional amendment on the Electricity Act of 2023, the electricity, of course, was moved to the concurrent list, exclusive list of the Constitution. And that empowered the subnationals to now play in that sector. So you're right. Here in Imo State, it's a transition, and we started very well. We had to comply fully with the Act, Section 230 of that Act. With that, having complied fully with that Act, Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, NEC, that of course that has been responsible for the central management of Nigeria electricity supply industry, now had to granted the regulatory oversight of Imo electricity to us in Imo State. And of course, we went ahead to establish our own regulatory body, Imo State Electricity Regulatory Commission, ISEC. With ISEC in place, we now have to start granting licenses. We granted license to Orashi Electricity Company Limited. Orashi was granted the license to generate electricity, to transmit and also distribute electricity. And I want to say you're right, we now signed a memorandum of agreement with Orashi to now provide electricity across the 27 local governments of Imo State. That they have started. The first phase of Orashi's program to upgrade, develop the electricity transmission and the distribution network in Imo State has started with the construction of 50 kilometers, 132 kV transmission line from Owerri to Olu. It's important to note that Imo State electricity network was gradually underdeveloped. There was need for us to expand the grid and also upgrade some of the facilities. So Russia started first by expanding the grid by constructing a 132 kV, 50 kilometers of 132 kV from here in Owerri to Olu to link up two number 60 MVA transformers that's been lying there. With that, the whole of that area would now have capacity, adequate power going to them. So that's a milestone. So that program is now going on. The construction of that 50 kilometers, 132 kV is ongoing from Owerri to Olu. Also, Orashi has also started another 15 kilometers, 33 kV line, now from Olu to the Polytechnic in Omoma. And also with installation of 15 MVA 33/11 kV injection substation. Russia has also started doing another 15 kilometers of 33 kV distribution line from the transmission station here in Owerri, Adelabu Road transmission station, to New Owerri. There's another 15 kilometers to New Owerri. And there's also with installation of a 7.5 MVA injection substation. What we're now doing in this new Owerri is to now pick up some very important load in Owerri. In fact, this project we're doing in Owerri is more like a pilot scale to showcase what Orashi, wants to do different from what has been going on. Because we have also targeted about 3,000 customers that will immediately be connected to these 7.5 MVA as soon as it's completed. And we hope that this project will be completed about June. The 7.5 MVA injection substation in the Owerri.
So, of course, we know that the issue of power is really capital intensive because it requires a lot of infrastructure. So, and I'm glad that you've given a timeline there that by June at least. But even in the midst of this, do you have renewable energy in your mix of planned electricity expansion?
Yeah, we do. We do have, of course, like you rightly said, what is available on the grid is certainly not enough. So you must complement with renewable, particularly solar, option. And then we are collaborating very closely with the Rural Electrification Agency, REA, to be able to reach out to communities that are unserved and underserved areas. The Rural Electrification Agency has an initiative that is called DARES. That is what they've launched now. This program is intended to reach out to unserved and underserved areas across Nigeria. Of course, we are collaborating with them. It's important that we also, deploy renewable energy. Like I said, what you have on the grid is certainly for now cannot go around the whole country. So that is an option.
Okay, so is it just Orashi you're working with? Do you have other private sector participants or arm of government that's also working maybe on other parts so it can be accelerated? Any plan of such?
Russia at the moment, of course, we know that with the setting in place, they have been granted license, and Russia has been granted license to go into both generation, distribution, as well as transmission, and they've started. And so far, they are doing very well, and they were following up what they're doing. So that's his position.
All right, so when we talk to discos especially, we hear them complain of the tariff, that the tariff is not cost reflective or service reflective. That means that there's a disincentive for private sector investors to go in there. What are you doing about the issues around tariff and payment of bills by consumers?
Yes, of course, you know what you have currently in the state is the SOPCO. The EEDC that was, of course, managing electricity distribution across the Southeast state and Imo State as well, by the order granting us regulatory oversight. What is remain of EEDC in Imo State now is a SOPCO, is a subsidiary of EEDC. So they now operate as a SOPCO. The tariff they are also currently running, we are looking at, obviously going into tariff methodology of our own. By the time we're able to, because it's a gradual process, when we're able to, get Orashi facilities in place, and we'll get it running. Mind you, we also have here in Imo State enough abundant gas supply at Ebwema, where we are doing also an Ebwema plant. So we are hoping that on completion of this plant, we'll be able to, have enough gas to generate enough power here in Imo State. So that if we're able to generate enough power in Imo State from this gas, yes, the issue of a tariff will be adequately handled. But at the moment, what is being run now is this cost-effective tariff. That is what is being run at the moment. And of course, you know that you also have customers classified, into bands. The customers on band A, are paying higher. Their tariff is higher, and down the line. So obviously, as we go on, the issue of tariff will be handled, so that the people at the lower level will not be subjected to, high tariff.
And the other issue, which is a national issue, is metering. We've seen federal government make a lot of attempts, to ensure that every consumer has meters. Do you have your own program to ensure that residents in Imo State are metered, or are you still depending on the program and policies of the federal government to get consumers metered in Imo State?
Yes, you're right. The issue of metering has been a major problem. And of course, again, it was this issue of the people the various companies that took over the distribution of electricity in Nigeria by 2013. In my opinion, many of them were not really didn't have the necessary capacity to run the outfit. Because if you were taking over such an outfit, you know that you need to maintain. You also need to meter your customers. And over these years, customers were not metered. A lot of them were being subjected to unnecessary estimated billing, which has been a problem. So what we are now doing in this transition, we are going to deal with some of these anomalies. Orashi, their current arrangement now with as I said, the pilot program we are running now in Owerri here. Orashi is going to start with metering 3,000 customers. The meters are down. The arrangement has to be sorted in place, yes.
So with all of these plans now, when can the residents of Imo State expect to actually feel this supply, the one from Orashi and all of the arrangements? When can they say, yes, from this period, we're going to have improved power, perhaps? If you have an idea of how many hours they can expect from a target period, that would be nice.
Thank you. Well, as I said, what we are doing here in Owerri, where we are doing 15 kilometers, of distribution line and installation of a 7.5 MVA transformer. We are using that, or actually using that as a pilot, project. We are hoping to complete, as I said, this project by June. If we complete this project by June, customers who will benefit from it, because the 7.5 is not going to, supply electricity to the entire people in Owerri or in Imo. But as I said, that is going to be a pilot scheme to showcase what we would expect to have across Imo when we are done. So that, of course, is going to be true by about June, as I said. And if we do that, it is hoped that the availability on that feeder is going to be 24 hours. The availability on that feeder is going to be 24 hours, because the system will be built so that you're not going to have, regular, collapse of system. So we are looking at the customers who will be tied onto the RASH scheme that is going to be commissioned, hopefully, between June and July, to have the supply 24 hours. There's going to be the availability on that feeder.
I hope at least Owerri can compete with Aba and what Governor Oti is doing in Abia State.
Sure. Whether we even do more than Aba, Owerri is going to become the hub, electricity hub in the south, in this zone. And the reason, as I said, is because we have the gas, enormous gas deposit here. It's going to be gas to power. You see, what we should understand about, development in the power sector, it's a little bit more complex, because you have to deal with the issue of generation. You have to also come to transmission and distribution. So while we are now trying to expand the grid and also upgrade some of our facilities, some of the overloaded transformers, those are the issues that we're now beginning to deal with. As I said, the people who were operating this network before now did virtually nothing by way of upgrading the network or developing the network. So what we're trying to do now is to develop and also upgrade some of the overloaded facilities. And this one is going to guarantee, reliable electricity supply. When you now have your transformers that are not overloaded, when you have your lines that are well, connected, and you don't need to, so long as you have power on the grid, you're going to have supply 24 hours. Anything that is going to result to not having power during that period might be a problem that's completely outside the state. Because if you have a problem with the grid, it will affect everywhere. Other than that, what we're not doing, particularly what Orashi is doing by the agreement we reached with them, is to ensure that they provide quality, affordable and reliable electricity across Imo State.
All right, thank you so much, and we look forward to that. We're counting down to June. After next month, the next month is April, then we have June. Engineer, we're going to remind you.
Our governor, His Excellency, the recipient of Infrastructure Governor of the Year, he has done so much in the area of infrastructure, and we're replicating that in the power sector. So we are conscious of the time we're given. The work is ongoing as I speak to you now.
All right. Okay. Counting down. Maybe a lot of us will have to relocate to Owerri to enjoy this.
Yes. You really have to.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Engineer Nwabueze Oguchienti, the Commissioner for Power and Electricity in Imo State.
Thank you.
Now, as Nigeria navigates economic recovery and seeks to strengthen its labor market, the federal government says it's stepping up efforts to regulate foreign participation in the workforce. In a high-level meeting in Lagos, stakeholders gathered to address growing concerns around job security, national capacity development, and the enforcement of new expatriate laws is at the core of it.
This is a gathering of organized labor, the leadership of the Nigeria Immigration Service, the Nigerian Civil Defense, and foreign nationals working in the country.
The Ministry of Immigration, the General of the Ministry of Immigration.
The focus, the federal government's new expatriate quota policy, taking effect from August the 1st this year. The Director General of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NACA, sets the tone for the conversation.
Getting out of the country on a daily basis, you have an equally high number of foreigners, friends, and nationals of different countries also trooping into the country. That is the irony of it. And that becomes very important for different countries, even Nigeria, to take more than the cursory look at the issues surrounding the coming in and the going out of these persons. And the reforms that have started or that was started by the Honorable Minister for Interior since his absorption of this.
The federal government is issuing a stern warning to expatriates applying for jobs that Nigerians are fully qualified to do. The Minister of Interior drives home the point.
I was embarrassed when a colleague minister showed me a quota, and I shared that experience with DG NECA. Why do you need a quota for a waitress? And I was ashamed that it was actually approved in the ministry. I have to say, let's call a spade a spade. And for me, are you telling me waitress? One of the biggest companies in Nigeria sent a request for quota. And guess what? One of the requests was a driver. How can we do this to our country? And somebody will sit down and approve quota for a driver. Are you telling me we don't have drivers? I mean, the expatriate you are bringing to come and drive, is it that he knows the Nigerian road? I don't understand.
He stresses the importance of knowledge and skills transfer to grow young Nigerian talent, a priority that cannot be overemphasized.
Today, we have a country where there are expatriates doing the same job for more than 10, 15, 20 years. Even if we are the dullest people in the world, 15 years is enough to train and understudy on a job. Let's call it spade a spade. There are so many places you will see jobs, engineering jobs. The expatriate is an engineer or this, degree, and you will see the expatriate there. It's just a boy that just finished school sat. That's the data that they will submit. Where you have like electrical engineer, they will just put school sat as understand, just to fulfill all requirements. At the end of the day, they say we are training, he has still not known it. Are you telling me we don't have Nigerian engineers that can be understudies, Nigerian graduates? If a graduate job, all you are providing for me as an understudy is a school sat, then you are not helping my country.
To sanitize the system, the government is introducing full automation of combined expatriate residence permit and alien card, SEPA.
That one is very serious. You must fill it. You must fill the exit card online, just when you fill the landing card that you are leaving. And that is a weapon to tackle the issue of visa overstayers. If you have overstayed your visa, we will know through the exit card. And if it is one that allows for penalties, we will tell you to pay your penalty. And if it is the one that has gone beyond penalty, that if you overstay for 30 months, you have 5 years ban, 5 years. If you overstay for 1 year, don't come back to this country. Don't come. So, but airlines, before they launch, you will see your exit. Because people will not come to Nigeria for tourism, for food tourism, and be in Nigeria for 3 years to work.
With these reforms, the federal government is sending a clear message: Nigeria must prioritize its workforce, ensure fair play in its labor system, and promote meaningful knowledge transfer that drives local capacity and national growth.
Well, from there, let's head to the agricultural sector value chain. More, Nigeria still faces that huge post-harvest loss of about 50% and costing about 3.5 trillion naira annually. Obviously, a big threat to food security in the country. What's the problem? Well, looking down the value chain, preservation, storage facilities, these are issues that have been pointed to 4 years now as the reason Nigeria keeps recording these post-harvest losses. We've had certain moves like the Bank of Industry collaborating with Raw Materials Research and Development Council in order to halt post-harvest losses. But how much impact or results have we seen from that? Let's talk to someone who deals in this line. He is the president of Agric and Industrial Entrepreneurs of Nigeria. He is Mr. Chukwu Nwachukwu, joins us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Nwachukwu, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Ini, and thank you for having me.
Good, sir. So why does it seem as if this is incurable, the issue of post-harvest losses? In the midst of the threats of food security, we still have to lose about 50% of what we produce.
Well, that's, to me, is laughable, really. When you talk about post-harvest losses, you want to ask yourself, have we even produced enough? If we're producing enough to lose so much post-harvest, then why are the prices of food and commodities still so high? And so somebody somewhere is not telling people the truth. The truth is that if losses are at all, it's minimal, probably setting up again to go on a jamboree of expenditure on that road we've been before. If you recall, several years ago, there was silos. There were silos installed in almost every local government, and those silos have been vandalized because nobody ever put in anything there. And so when you're talking about post-harvest losses, are they real, or is it something to set up for somebody to import silos again, build something? If you want to tackle the idea of post-harvest losses, you have to put it in a strategy. You have to study what are we losing, but go back to the fundamentals. If there's excess food produced, then why are the prices so high? I think that those who are trying to maximize whatever gains they want to make by awarding this contract should first of all talk about the production and being able to feed Nigerians first. I don't think that there's that much loss, if at all. But if you want to talk about storage and stuff like that, must there be high-level silos? You put silos where you have excess, so you have a strategy to talk about food security. The essence of food security in the first place is when there's a dearth of, or some farming or a deficiency or deficit, or the prices are rising, then you inject some of those things to stabilize the prices. And so when you want to talk about this, get the strategy right. This is ridiculous, and as far as I'm concerned, rubbish.
Yeah, but Mr. Nwachukwu, when we see the reality that in Nigeria there are seasons, for instance, this is a season for mango, so we have a lot of mango, you have it at cheap prices, but in a few months from now, you don't even see it. If you see it, it's really expensive. And we have crops like that. Doesn't that point to the fact that we do have the issue or challenge of storage, preservation of our crops?
Again, I talk about the strategy of it. Now we have seasonal cropping. You're right. Yeah, sometimes you have tomatoes, and sometimes you have mangoes and stuff like that. Wouldn't it be better to talk about how to use those products or the produce as raw materials for processing? You know, because we import virtually everything in Nigeria, into Nigeria. So rather than talking about what are you going to store mangoes for? It requires cool environment. It requires, you got to preserve it in such a state that it seems fresh each time you eat it. There isn't enough raw materials in this country. And those raw materials could form bases for further industrialization. So those who are talking about this thing should first look at how do you create a supply chain management in such a way that they become available raw materials, for production in another sector, for small-scale industrialization. We're working on it, and we're talking about creating in every local government, one industry. So we're going to use these raw materials that you think are rotting away to produce. So it goes back to what I'm talking about. Create a strategy whereby you take this produce and they become raw materials for further processing. That's the way to go. But somebody somewhere, I suspect, is going back to the storage area when they build silos and go back and study those silos. They're all dismantled, vandalized. Nobody ever stored anything there. So let's take a step back, get the strategy right, and defeat this narrative of anybody talking about excess this and that. It's not excess because those are raw materials for further production.
Yeah, so what do you suggest? I know you're always talking about local government to a crop. I wonder how that's going, and how do we bring up this strategy that you refer to be able to preserve those excess and use as raw materials?
I'm not talking about preserving them. Like I said, in my organization, we're promoting with NOLGE, hopefully, National Union of Local Government Employees, to create clusters in every local government. Now, further to that, we're going to create what we'll call one local government, one industry. So those produce after domestic consumption will become raw materials for those industries. So when you take a look at a particular local government, you find what crops are advantageous for them. If you take cassava, for instance, you can't say there's excess cassava because it becomes raw materials for gari. It becomes raw materials for further processing into cassava chips, ethanol, medications, and stuff like that. So you now put some other small-scale industries, and that's it. Through that, this is what is called the supply, the value chain to production. So what I'm saying, and I would vigorously suggest to government to abandon that quest, so this narrative they're trying to create to go and build silos. Somebody somewhere setting us up for that sort of thing again. Now, when you look at it, you produce tomatoes because you don't have the capability to store them because they're perishable. So let them now establish one local industry, which we're trying to do with NOLGE, National Union of Local Government Employees. One person, an entrepreneur, not government. You make a mistake. When you talk about government setting up industries, government cannot run a business. Business must be private sector driven and must necessarily rest on small and medium enterprises and the informal sector. The National Director of Employment tried to create impetus to teach people all that, but now there's so much multiplicity of programs that there's no cohesive, there's no coordinated approach to solving the problem. So you need to talk again, like take a look at the apple, take a look at the mangoes. If you have excess, you do not have storage for it. If you want to store it, then you have to, when you bring it out, it has to be looking fresh and pure for you to eat. So if you can't store it, then what's the next thing? You process it. So you don't need to store it. Put an industry in that area where you have excess mango and it will be done.
So I guess the next thing would be, what incentive can we put in those areas to attract the needed investment and investors who will build those industries? Because we know there are a lot of disadvantages, especially in the rural areas where you have most of these crops. You have the infrastructure disadvantage, power, road, insecurity. So what incentives do you see that can attract this investment, at least in short-term, medium-term max?
Well, you know, the government has a role to play in it and inject capital into the development finance institutions. At the beginning of this segment of your program, you talked about central bank complaining about losses they incurred by so many bad policies they've initiated because they do not take time to actually study them. You came up with a ridiculous thing. What? Fine, it should have been good, called Anchor Borrowers Program, but huge losses there. And so what does the central bank do? They cut it off, just like that. They set up task forces to recover it. Instead of blaming themselves for bad policy in this initiative in the first place, because it was not well conceived. You don't conceive a policy by yourselves when you know nothing about it. I started with the Development Finance Department. I told them, hey, this thing, look at the Anchor Borrowers Program, it's a failure. Look at the Commercial Agricultural Program, it's a failure because you insist more on creating, irrevocable standard of payment or the ISPO. So as long as you get your money back, you don't care about production process. Now, when talks with Development Bank of Nigeria, and they see one of the executive directors sees it correctly. So when they put that money, so government can put money in development finance institutions. But this development finance institution cannot lend directly to the entrepreneurs. And so we're now working with deposit money banks who do not see SMEs as a good platform to lend money to because they will assume the risks. And so government has got to look at the strategies really to promote entrepreneurship. There's a business owners who would now farm and then produce things that will create raw materials. We also have partnership with Raw Materials Research Council. We have a DG. The previous DG was awesome. The current DG is quite focused as well. We'll talk to them. So I think they see what's going on. You talked about the relationship with Bank of Industry. I'm going to sit down with them and advise them because Bank of Industry is not focused into that relationship. No government agency can succeed in creating businesses because you're not equipped to run businesses. Businesses, as we initiated in the NDE at those times, must be private sector driven. And those private sectors are entrepreneurs. So when government is not going to do it, then the private sector will have to step up and do it.
All right. President of Agric and Industrial Entrepreneurs of Nigeria, Mr. Chukwu Nwachukwu. Thank you so much for that. We hope.
Yeah, let me just say, let me just say something here. Now, what I want people to go away with, there is instead of calling it excess, turn it from production to raw materials to produce more. That's what we're talking about.
All right, Mr. Nwachukwu, thank you so much for that perspective and for joining the program this morning.
Thank you.
All right, now let's take a break. When we come back, we'll head to the global scene. Just stay with us. You're welcome back. We're going straight to the global scene now, and we know that, of course, tariff is still the theme of conversation there, but the latest is that exemption to tax by President Donald Trump. And we know that most of it is going to affect China, which is supposed to be the biggest enemy here. But let's find out how other world leaders and countries are reacting to this. We have Juliana, our correspondent, joining us. Hi, Juliana. Good morning. I wonder how much of this tariff exemption will be affecting the UK?
Good morning, Inez. Good morning. Right, so it's quite interesting, isn't it, that what we're seeing from Donald Trump is once again a potential softening of these tariffs. And although these are mostly to do with big American businesses, so the likes of Apple, Nvidia, have been really stressed out, trying to lobby the White House to soften these tariffs because, of course, it affects their consumers. This does have a major knock-on effect, particularly for the UK. So on the positive side, this is very good for UK retailers, because there are so many tech retailers that were concerned there would be significant job cuts because, of course, prices would have to go up. So the fact that there could be a softening on these tariffs is a good thing. However, there are potentially a softening of tariffs on semiconductor chips. Now, this may be a bit of an issue for the UK government, because before this Labour government, we know that Rishi Sunak, the predecessor of Sir Keir Starmer, he did attempt to create this £1 billion chip industry to basically make sure that the UK was chip secure because of strained relationships with China. Now, if Donald Trump does soften export and import tariffs on chips coming from China, then this potentially places the UK under threat. So there are good and bad consequences, I would say, from the latest announcements we're getting from the White House.
Yeah, but Juliana, it seems we still have to wait for details of it. We don't know how soft he is going to be, if it's different percentage or if it's a blanket for everyone. I wonder if you've heard anything about that.
Certainly not. In terms of from the UK, I think, the UK has really been focusing on trying to save its own domestic industries from issues that are coming out of the White House. I think we spoke a couple of days ago on the Business Show, and we know that, yes, even though he has withdrawn some of those really high tariffs, there's still that 10% universal tariff band, and the UK falls under that.
All right, and then also in the UK, there are issues about raw materials for British steel. What's that about?
Well, yeah, this is a pretty significant story. In fact, Parliament was recalled on Saturday. I think this is only the 5th or 6th time that Parliament has been recalled on Saturday since the end of World War II. So it just goes to show how huge this issue is with British Steel and the Chinese firm that owns British Steel, which is Yingye. And now, purely because of the situation that's happening with Donald Trump, Yingye have decided that keeping the furnaces on fire in Scunthorpe to produce British Steel is no longer of value to them. In fact, I believe they said that they were losing £700,000 every single day. And they planned to shut down these 2 sites in England, which not only would have seen the losses of about 3,000 jobs, it would have also made Britain the only nation within the G7 not to produce raw steel. This is the reason why Parliament was recalled on Saturday, and there are now emergency measures in place to ensure that any country that is dealing with a critical British firm must make sure that they're able to at least provide some emergency cover for their staff until there is some sort of nationalisation. So at the moment, the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, is in significant conversations with the Chinese to try and save these jobs. But as I said, it's not just the jobs. I think Britain are thinking geopolitically. They cannot afford the closure of these steel sites, because if they do, then they're going to be in a critical situation.
All right, and any big data for the week?
Okay, it's quite a big week this week. We've got UK unemployment data coming up on Wednesday, as well as retail sales figures. And it's probably worth mentioning that I am not speaking with you from London. I'm speaking to you from Morocco at GITEX Africa, which is a huge event. We got over 45,000 visitors here, large cohort from Nigeria, looking at tech startups Huawei, Microsoft are also going to be announcing a strategy from Nigeria. So very busy week, busy in terms of data from London, but also busy in terms of tech data and very exciting startup data from right here in Morocco.
Days, you would give us more gist about the tech events in Morocco that you're attending. I hope we can look forward to that one of these days.
Absolutely, we will be making sure that we send lots of interviews and news and all of the happenings in Morocco.
All right, thank you so much, and do take care of you right there in Morocco.
Thank you, Betty.
All right, and just before we go, let's tell you other stories, obviously connected to the tariffs. Start from China. Their export jumped more than expected in March as businesses front-loaded outbound shipments to avoid that prohibitive U.S. tariffs, while imports expected declined. A sluggish domestic demand persisted. Export jumped 12.4% last month in the U.S. dollar terms from a year earlier, according to data released by the Customs authorities, significantly outpacing estimates of 4.4% growth and marking the biggest jump since October last year. So traders just tried to make the most of it before the implementation of the U.S. tariff, which obviously that window is closed by now. Still in China, Chinese exchange-traded funds received record inflows as state-backed buyers pulled out all the stops to shield the market against Trump's tariff. Equity ETFs listed onshore saw nearly $24 billion in net inflows last week, eclipsing a prior record of about $23 billion that was set in October. And in Europe, we see tech stocks jumped 2.4%, boosting regional market after that tariff exemption announcement by President Trump. So I guess we might see green markets this afternoon. Meanwhile, in Thailand, Thailand's finance and commercial ministers will lead a delegation to the U.S. to meet Trump's administration officials and push for relief from planned heavy tariffs. This is according to government spokesperson. Advance team led by the finance minister will travel to U.S. on Thursday for meetings. Remember, President Trump had said 75 countries have been reaching out to him for negotiations, and that's why he got a bit soft on the tech side. One would think perhaps it is because he says that the U.S. might be losing more than they are gaining. That's why it's just the techs. And the tech mostly come from China, even though we see them diverting to India. Now, I'm talking about India. They will begin sector-specific trade discussion today with the United States, with South Asian nation. Virtual talks is going to be virtual, begins this week, and their way of development. By the end of May, both sides aim to have clarified the sectors where they have room for concession. It looks like President Trump will still give concessions. Meanwhile, in a major realignment, we see that Apple is now manufacturing about $22 billion iPhones in India, shifting away from China. There you go. The new trade routes begins to take shape, and that's what we're seeing. We know we'll see more of this as the trade tariff picture gets brighter and we understand it more. We'll see new trade partners and new trade routes around the world. Hopefully, Africa can be somewhere in there. India is benefiting from now. We do hope that Africa can also find its way and benefit from that. That's the much we can take on Business Morning today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. We'll go around the world again this time tomorrow. But before then, 1 p.m., I'll be back. We'll do markets, we'll do Africa right here on Channels Television. That's 1 p.m. Business Incorporated. I'm John Maka, and I'll see you then.